Hey, my name's Adam, and I've done over £20 million in e-commerce over the past decade. And I want to show you why most people fail. Not because the opportunity isn't real, but because they are focused on the wrong things. So let's start with the first one. Not understanding your numbers. This one is bigger than most people realize. When I first started selling on Amazon, I wasn't just selling in the UK. I was doing this thing called Pan-European FBA through Amazon, and that would allow me to sell in different European marketplaces like France, Germany, Spain, Italy. Okay? And so at the time, my orders were coming in from those different marketplaces and money was landing in my account. And I remember thinking, okay, this is working, right? As an 18-year-old making, tens of thousands of pounds per month, I genuinely thought I was making good money. But I hadn't really sat down and looked at the numbers properly. And so what I didn't realize at the time was that the fees in those countries were different. So for a product that I was selling in the UK where the fees were £5, over there, the fees may have been €7 or €8 or even more, right? So some of them were higher than the UK. On top of that, there were currency conversions happening that I hadn't really factored in either. So on the surface, it looked fine. But when I eventually went back and I broke everything down, right? Because, it's been 3 weeks now, I've done all these sales, and now I'm sitting down looking at the numbers. I realized something. On some products, I was barely making any money. And on other products, I was actually losing money, right? I had the odd few products, obviously, that were making some good margins, but on many, I was losing out. And so that's when it all clicked, right? The problem wasn't Amazon. It wasn't the marketplace. The problem wasn't the product. The problem was that I didn't fully understand my costs. So this is the lesson that I want you to take away from this first point. Before you ever make a sale, regardless of whatever business you are doing, before you do anything, you need to understand your numbers. Not roughly, but properly, okay? You need to know what the product costs you. You need to know what it costs to ship. You need to know what the platform fees are. You need to know what the payment processing fees are, right? Because different platforms have different processing fees. They pay you differently, right? Amazon pays you after a couple of days. Shopify pays you directly into your account when someone's paid, right? So irrespective of whatever website you're selling on, whether it's Amazon, eBay, TikTok, your own website, the principles are the same. You do not want to be finding out your profit after you've sold everything. You want to know it beforehand. Because, sales feel good. But profit is what actually keeps the business alive. Moving on to mistake number 2. Creating a Me Too product. Wow, this is one of the biggest traps that I see people falling into right now. And honestly, social media has made it so much worse. Everywhere you look, you've got people saying the same thing, right? These so-called gurus who've been selling online for 3 months. Just find a product that's selling, copy it, slap your own branding on it, and then launch it on the marketplace. And so people do exactly that, right? So they see something selling well like a shilajit, right? So they think, that looks good. They find a manufacturer, they contact them, they negotiate the pricing. And so once they've done that, they put their own logo on it. Maybe they tweak the packaging a little bit, right? So now they've got a shilajit and it's called Adam's shilajit. Instead of a black packaging like everyone else, they've changed it. They've made it blue or white with a gold lid at the top, right? They launch it on Amazon, they post it on TikTok, and then suddenly it either completely flops or it sells a little bit, right? So nowhere near what their time, energy, and investment is worth. And so this is where most people get confused. They'll say, but it's selling well for everyone else. Why isn't it working for me? You see, the problem isn't the product itself. The problem is that they never really took the time to understand the market they were entering. And what I mean by that is they didn't look at the data properly. right? So they didn't analyze the competition. They didn't ask themselves and think whether there was actually space for another version of the same thing. They just assumed that because it worked for someone else, it would work for them too. And sometimes, yes, there is an opportunity for that. But the reality is, if you are entering a crowded market with a Me Too product, with a copycat product, right, you are making life 10 times harder for yourself. Because what you'll find is you will end up competing against brands that have A, been there for longer, B, have far more reviews, right? They've got hundreds, if not thousands, if not tens of thousands of more reviews. As a result, they've got more trust, right? Because they've been on these platforms for so many years, they've got all these customers, they've got the data, they've got the trust with the platforms, they've got the data for their advertising, for their marketing. And so because they've been going for this many years, right, they've purchased so many thousands of units from their manufacturers, often they'll have far better margins than you, right? So unless you're really early or you are bringing something genuinely different to the table, it's going to be an uphill battle. And so this is where most people burn time, money, and effort. And so they don't fail because e-commerce didn't work. They failed because they copied something without understanding why it worked in the first place. When it comes to e-commerce, the people who succeed don't just ask what's selling, they ask where is the space? Okay? What's missing in that space? What problem isn't being solved properly yet? Okay? And so that shift alone can save you a lot of wasted time, a ton of money, and a huge amount of effort and unnecessary frustration. Number 3, not understanding your customer. So this actually bridges on from the previous point. Now, when it comes to building your own brand and selling products on any platform, most people don't realize who they are actually selling to. They think they do, but they don't. So they'll say things like, yeah, my product, my Shilajit, it's for men, it's for people aged between 25 to 40. And so that's it. They think that's who their customer is. But on the surface level, what they don't understand is why that person is actually buying. Okay, so by buying this Shilajit, what problem is this person actually trying to solve? Okay, because if you have someone who's a 25-year-old buying this product, they're trying to solve one thing. If you have a 45-year-old buying that product, they're buying it for another thing, right? So what things are they frustrated with? What's annoying them enough to make them want to pull their card out and buy that product? What have they already tried that perhaps didn't work, right? Do you see where I'm going with this? Because if you don't understand this part, everything else starts to feel off, right? So the product feels generic. The branding doesn't really connect with the type of person that wants to buy the product. The listing that you have on Amazon's marketplace, on TikTok, on your own website, it starts to feel like every other generic listing out there. And so then the people selling these products are confused. They wonder why their product is getting clicks, but no sales. Why people are visiting their page, they've come to their website, they've come to their product page, but then they're just clicking off and they end up buying from a competitor, right? Or even worse, they don't even click on your product page at all. I see this all the time. And it actually happened to me early on, right? And the thing is, people build products based on what they like or what they've seen selling well for someone else. And so they do that instead of really thinking about the other person on the other side of the screen. And so this is the key thing to understand. Customers don't wake up wanting to buy products. They don't wake up wanting to buy a Shilajit, right? They wake up wanting to solve problems. So they buy solutions to specific problems. And if you don't understand that problem properly, you end up guessing. You end up guessing your messaging, you end up guessing your images, you end up guessing your pricing, the way your product is marketed and advertised to your target customer, right? The keywords you use for your targeting. If you do not understand your audience, you don't understand what searches they are making into the search bar, right? And so with everything you do, the guessing gets very expensive very quickly when it comes to your marketing, when it comes to everything, right? Because if the product flops, you lose money. So the brands that do well are the ones that almost get obsessive about their target customer. They know what annoys their target audience. They know what their target audience cares about. And so as a result, they know what would make their target audience trust that brand and what would make them choose this product over all of the others out there. If you compare it to a shopfront, you've got 10 different products. Why would someone choose this product instead of all of these other ones there? And so when you understand this, you don't have to try and convince them anymore. You just show the right product to the right person in the right way. Number 4, not focusing on building a brand. Now, this one actually follows on from the previous point as well. If there's one thing that you take away from this video, let it be this. For a long time, especially over the past few years, there's been this culture online where people were told that branding doesn't really matter. And a lot of that came from these so-called gurus all over social media pushing things like dropshipping, making you get quick wins, selling random cheap-ass products, and just testing stuff. And to be completely honest, for a period of time, that actually worked. And I saw it a lot on Amazon in particular, back in 2016, 2017. You'd have one brand selling a dog toy. Then that same brand is selling a health supplement, a Shilajit or whatever, right? Even though it wasn't popular back then. And then the same brand selling a kitchen utensil. And then something completely unrelated, right? And so they had a store with 30 different products, all 30 products completely unrelated, right? There was no identity, there was no focus, there's no real customer base or audience, right? These were just people taking advantage of the platform and the opportunity, right? So they were making some sales, they were making some profit, and then they were moving on to the next shiny thing, right? They went from the fidget spinner to the hoverboard to whatever else came after that. And up until a few years ago, it worked. Until it didn't. So now, these platforms have completely shifted. They've completely changed. People's buying habits are now completely different, right? Over the past few years, trust levels have gone down. And so here is the real issue with that approach. Even if you can make it today, there's no real value in the business, right? Because when your brand is just a collection of random products, the only value you have is pretty much in whatever inventory you hold of those products, right? You're not building any loyalty, you're not building any repeat customers, nothing actually compounds. Now, if you compare that with building a real brand, right? When you build a real brand, you're building a group of people who trust you and want to buy from you. Not just a one-time purchase, but perhaps they want to buy from you over and over again. And if I give you an example, let's say you're selling a beauty cream, okay? So it's a beauty moisturizer, for example. Now, what other product, as a brand owner, could you sell that your target audience, your target customer, could perhaps buy? So they've bought a face moisturizer, perhaps they can buy a night cream, right? A vitamin C serum, right? So instead of selling anything and everything, you're focused on one type of customer. And so that changes everything. And when you look to grow your brand and when you look to launch more products, because that customer had a good experience from you, because they know you, they are far more likely to buy another product from you of a different variation, right? So they are someone who trusts you, they are someone who knows you. If they know that your first product was good, perhaps they're going to try out this other product because of that experience they've already had with their previous purchase. And so that directly ties back into understanding your customer. Because when you know exactly who you are selling to, your marketing becomes clearer. Your messaging through your videos and your copywriting makes sense. Your images make sense. Your product range makes sense, right? And so over time, you're not just making sales, but you are building a following. And so that is the difference. Now, I've done it before. I've purchased products from TikTok shop. I purchased a rosemary oil. I ended up buying a botana oil, a hair scrub, a bottle, So if they were just selling random products, I wouldn't buy these random products. But because I knew one product worked well, I went and purchased other products later on down the line because I had that good experience with them. I knew the product worked. And so I gave these guys another shot. And so when you do that really well, you build a brand that has value. And at the end of the day, it's an asset, something that you can grow, something that you can scale. And eventually later on down the line, you can even sell this business for a really nice multiple of your profits. Number 5, expecting fast results. Now look, I've been in this game for over a decade. And when I first started, I had no clue what actually worked. Okay, so in fact, I dropped out of college to do this. And so in my head at the time, I was expecting results straight away, right? Sales, profits, proof that I'd made the right decision. Okay, so proof that I could say to these people who were my haters that, I'm getting good results. And then it really hit. I launched my first products. Nothing really happened, right? Or it did, but just very slowly. It was just a lot of effort that I had put in with very little to show for it at the start. And honestly, that's the same pretty much for everyone else, or for those who try and do this themselves. The truth is, business takes time. No matter what industry you're in, whether it's Airbnb, trading stocks, running a franchise, or building an e-commerce brand, nothing meaningful happens overnight. I mean, think about it, right? You go to college, university, spend years and years learning to then start a job. Now, do you expect to start earning a wage in the highest bracket immediately? No. You know that it's going to take another 5, 10, 15 years for you to get to that point where you start making good money. And so the same applies with business. Some business models give you quicker feedback. Some take longer to get going. Some make less money, but they feel faster, like you're getting results upfront. And others, for example, take more time upfront, right? More work upfront, but they pay you far more in the long run. And e-commerce especially, when done properly, falls into that category. It's a top-heavy business, right? So you do a lot of the work up front. So you make many decisions before you see results, right? Yes, you see results in the sense of your packaging and the product and things like that. But in terms of sales, right, you're investing time, in money and energy before things start to click and sales start to come into your dashboard. And so unfortunately, that's the mindset that many beginners have, and it makes them go down the wrong path. They expect sales immediately, they expect profits from day one, and when it doesn't happen, they assume something's broken, especially on platforms like Amazon, right? People forget that there's an algorithm, the system that's running this whole thing. It doesn't go from page 20 to page 1 in the matter of 2 days, right? It takes time, it takes data, and it takes consistency. So with these platforms, you are building history, right? So you are building trust with the platform right? Not only with your customers with reviews, but with the platform, right? So you need to show the platform proof that you get sales, that people like your product, and that your product is better than the other options out there, right? And so the key thing to understand when you're building an e-commerce business is this: the work you are putting in now isn't for today. It's for 3 months from now, 6 months from now, a year from now, right? As long as you follow the right path, the effort compounds. So patience isn't just a mindset thing, it's part of the strategy. And if you understand that and you give the process enough time to work, you can put yourself ahead of most people before they even realize what went wrong. So those are the 5 biggest mistakes I see people make over and over again, and the ones that you really want to avoid if you're serious about making this work. And if there's another key point that you want to take away from this video, it's this: e-commerce does work, but only when you approach it the right way, with the right expectations and a proper plan. Now, the purpose of this video isn't to sell you anything. I said that earlier on. It's to help you who's thinking about e-commerce or who's already started e-commerce think more clearly, avoid unnecessary mistakes, and those will allow you to make better decisions down the line. That being said, if you do want help avoiding those mistakes, and you want some guidance on starting, building, and eventually scaling your own e-commerce brand, just like how I've done to 6 figures and beyond, and you want to do so in a way that minimizes your risk and gives you the highest probability of success, I've put a link in the description that takes you to a case study video. Now you can watch it in your own time, and if it does resonate with you, you can fill out a form and you can book a call, and from there, me and my team will have a proper conversation with you to see if our goals align and if we can help you. And if we can, then that's great. And if not, there's no hard feelings at all. Either way, this content is here to educate you, to give you clarity, and to help you make the right decisions for your e-commerce journey. So that's it for this video. Thank you for watching. I genuinely appreciate you, and I wish you all the best moving forward.